It was a calm afternoon, the kind where the world seems to move just a little slower. The sun was warm, casting golden rays over the uneven pavement. As I walked down the familiar path, lost in thought, a soft sound broke the stillness, a faint meow, almost too quiet to hear. Before I could process it, a tiny weight brushed against my leg. I looked down, and there she was, a fragile, white kitten with the most pleading eyes I'd ever seen. Her tiny paws clung to my jeans, trembling as if the world around her was too big, too cold. Her soft, desperate meows tugged at my heart. It was as if she was begging me, silently pleading, "Please, don't leave me here." For a moment, time froze. The busy world faded away, leaving just the two of us in that moment. My heart ached at her vulnerability, her sheer trust in a stranger like me. It wasn't just a cry for help, it was a cry for hope. The faintest meow pulled my attention, and I stopped in my tracks. A tiny white kitten stood at my feet, her frail body trembling, her eyes wide with desperation. Before I could fully process the moment, she raised her tiny paws and clung to my jeans as though begging, "Please, don't leave me here." Her soft cries were barely audible, but they carried an urgency that pierced straight to my heart. Her little face was smudged with dirt, her fur matted, but her spirit shone through. I knelt down slowly, reaching out my hand, and she responded by pressing into my palm, her tiny body quivering with both fear and hope. In that instant, an unspoken bond formed between us. I couldn't just walk away, not after seeing her so helpless and full of trust. Without hesitation, I scooped her up into my arms, feeling her fragile frame lean into me as if she knew she was safe now. In her eyes, I saw a silent plea, and I knew I couldn't turn away. Whatever her story was, this kitten deserved a second chance. I made the decision right then and there. I was going to help her, no matter what it took. As I held the tiny white kitten close, her trembling slowly eased. But just as relief began to settle in, a faint, almost imperceptible meow caught my attention. It wasn't coming from her, it was from somewhere nearby. My eyes scanned the surroundings, and then I saw it, a large, heavy pipe lying in the grass, bound tightly with chains and secured by a padlock. The sound was coming from inside. I crouched down and peered into the darkness of the pipe. There, huddled in fear, was another kitten, a small tabby with wide, terrified eyes. She looked frail, her tiny body pressed against the cold interior as though trying to disappear. My heart sank. How long had she been trapped here? I immediately started searching for a way to free her. The chains were thick, and the padlock was secure. Frustration mounted as I tugged at them, but it was no use. I realized I had to find another way. Reaching through a narrow gap, I extended my hand toward her. She flinched at first, but then, slowly, cautiously, she inched closer. I could see she was hungry, desperate for comfort. I pulled out a sachet of food and squeezed a bit onto a leaf, carefully sliding it toward her. She hesitated but eventually licked it clean, her tiny frame trembling as she ate. Her trust, though fragile, gave me the determination I needed. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to loosen a section of the chain just enough to create a small opening. Gently, I reached in and cupped her in my hands, her little claws clinging to my fingers as if afraid to let go. As I brought her into the light, her weak cries softened, and she nestled into my palm, her exhaustion evident. Both kittens were now safe in my arms, and I felt a surge of relief wash over me. They had endured so much, but this was the start of a new chapter, one where they would never be left to fend for themselves again. The chains were tightly wrapped around the heavy pipe, their cold, metallic grip refusing to budge. The padlock dangled mockingly, a solid barrier between me and the helpless kitten inside. I tugged at the chains, my hands scraping against the rough surface, but they wouldn't give way. Frustration bubbled up as the faint, frightened meows continued to echo from within. I crouched down, peering into the darkness of the pipe. The tiny tabby kitten was curled up in a tight ball, her wide, frightened eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She flinched as I reached toward her, but hunger and desperation kept her rooted to the spot. I rummaged through my bag, pulling out a small sachet of food. Carefully, I squeezed a bit onto a leaf and slid it through a narrow gap in the chains. The kitten hesitated, her tiny nose twitching as she caught the scent. Slowly, cautiously, she began to lick the food, her frail body trembling with every bite. Seeing her trust me, even for a moment, gave me the strength I needed to keep trying. With no tools at hand, I focused on loosening the chains by hand, inch by inch. My fingers ached, and sweat dripped down my brow as I worked. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to create a small gap just wide enough to reach inside. Taking a deep breath, I extended my arm as far as it would go, my hand brushing against the kitten's soft fur. She flinched again, but as I spoke to her softly, she began to relax. Finally, I cupped her tiny frame in my hands and carefully pulled her out. Her body was so light, so fragile, as though she had been holding on to life by the faintest thread. She mewed softly, her voice weak but no longer filled with fear. I held her close to my chest, where she nestled into the warmth, her trembling starting to subside. Reunited with the white kitten, the two curled up together in my arms, their tiny bodies pressing into each other for comfort. A wave of relief washed over me as I watched them, safe at last. They had been through so much, but in this moment, they weren't alone anymore. Together, we had faced the struggle, and together, we had found hope. The kittens nestled in a small box lined with a soft towel as I carried them to the vet. The white kitten, though calmer now, still clung to her sibling, while the tabby kitten's frail body trembled with every bump along the way. Their soft mews filled the quiet moments, a mix of fear and exhaustion. When we arrived at the clinic, the vet took one look at them and immediately ushered us into an examination room. The air was thick with a mixture of antiseptic and hope as the vet carefully lifted each kitten. Her hands were gentle, her voice soothing as she examined their tiny bodies. "They're dehydrated and malnourished," she said, her brows furrowing with concern. "But with care, they'll recover." The kittens were weighed, their frail frames barely registering on the scale. The vet administered fluids to rehydrate them, and as the needles went in, they flinched but didn't cry. It was as if they knew this was part of their rescue, part of their chance at a new life. The white kitten, though visibly weak, showed a glimmer of curiosity as she sniffed the vet's gloves. The tabby kitten, on the other hand, remained curled up, her tiny body trembling as she leaned into the warmth of her sibling. Seeing them like this, so fragile yet so brave, only strengthened my resolve to give them the care they deserved. After a thorough checkup, the vet prescribed a high-nutrition diet and gave clear instructions for their care. "They're fighters," she said with a reassuring smile. "With some love and attention, they'll be just fine." I placed them gently back into their box, wrapping the towel snugly around them for warmth. As we left the clinic, I glanced down at the two little lives in my care. They had already endured so much, but now they had a fighting chance. And I knew, deep down, I wouldn't let them down. Back at home, I prepared a small, cozy space for the kittens. A soft blanket was laid out in a corner, along with a shallow bowl of fresh water and a plate of nutritious food. The white kitten cautiously stepped out of the box first, her nose twitching as she explored the new surroundings. The tabby kitten, still timid, hesitated but eventually followed, staying close to her sister for reassurance. Over the next few days, I followed the vet's instructions diligently, feeding them in small portions and ensuring they stayed hydrated. Slowly but surely, their energy began to return. The white kitten, now more confident, would pounce playfully at a ball of yarn, her tiny paws batting it around the room. The tabby kitten, though quieter, started showing her playful side as well, chasing after her sister with wobbly steps. Their personalities began to shine through, one bold and curious, the other gentle and observant. They quickly turned the little corner of my home into their own playground, climbing onto shelves, curling up in sunny spots, and occasionally tumbling into each other with soft, delighted squeaks. Seeing them thrive filled my heart with joy. They were no longer the frightened, fragile kittens I had found. They were survivors, full of life and mischief. And as I watched them curl up together on the blanket, purring softly in their sleep, I knew they were finally safe, loved, and home. As I watched the kittens snuggle together, their soft purring filling the quiet room, I couldn't help but reflect on how much their lives had changed, and mine too. It all started with a single moment of hesitation, a choice to stop and care. These tiny, fragile creatures had no voice, no way to ask for help except through their eyes and their trust in me. In saving them, I realized the impact even the smallest act of kindness can have. Strays like these kittens often go unnoticed, their cries drowned out by the noise of busy lives. But they deserve love, safety, and a chance to thrive, just like any of us. Now, as they played, ate, and rested in their new home, their transformation was a reminder that hope can come from the unlikeliest places. They had gone from frightened and fragile to lively and full of spirit, and their journey inspired me to do more, to never ignore a cry for help. I smiled as they tumbled over each other, chasing a string on the floor. Their future was bright, and their trust in me had given them a second chance at life. And in turn, they had given me a deeper appreciation for the quiet power of compassion.